The night descended over the sprawling emirate like a velvet cloak studded with stars. Within the imposing walls of the palace, gold flickered softly in the glow of crystal chandeliers, casting intricate shadows over priceless silk draperies and marble floors as smooth as desert glass. The air was heavy with the scent of exotic spices and rare incense, a tribute to centuries of unyielding power and wealth. At the center of it all stood the Billionaire Sheikh, his presence a force that commanded even the grandest of halls to fall silent. His sharp eyes burned with a quiet intensity, a king surveying his world with absolute control. Until tonight, when the unexpected shattered centuries of tradition. For years, the elite whispered about the rigid, unyielding nature of the Sheikh. His reputation for imperious dignity was matched only by the whispered rumors of wounds buried deep beneath his regal mask. Yet none dared pierce the veil of his perfection. Until now. Tonight, the unexpected unfolded with the arrival of a figure so incongruous among the opulence, his humble Nanny. She moved with a calm dignity that defied the sparkling jewels and tailored suits surrounding her. Her hands, once deft at soothing a restless child, now steadied a delicate silk gown that seemed almost out of place in this world of gold and glitter. The guests barely concealed their startled glances, some veiled smiles shadowed with surprise or disdain. Whispers rose like a rising tide, salty with judgment, as if the sheer presence of this woman could unravel the very fabric of this exclusive society. The Sheikh's eyes traced her outline closely. Her quiet strength was palpable. The way her breath came slow, controlled, hiding a maelstrom of resolve beneath a composed mask. A secret glinted in those deep, dark eyes, a flame that neither wealth nor luxury could douse. It was this secret that made her more than just his nanny. It made her a silent storm that threatened to upheave his kingdom of marble and gold. As they stepped onto the marbled ballroom floor, the contrast between them could not have been starker. His tailored black velvet suit bore the weight of generations. Her simple, modest gown whispered of a life lived far from the glittering palaces, amid dusty streets and quiet nights. And yet, there was an unspoken accord between them, a raw tension charged with unvoiced challenge and the tentative stirrings of an unlikely alliance. Voices hushed as the nanny paused, the entire room holding its breath. Then, with unexpected poise, she turned to the assembly, not with the meekness expected of someone from her world, but with a boldness that flashed like a blade in the dim light. Her decision, silent yet deafening, rippled through the crowd, piercing the thick veil of protocol and etiquette. The Sheikh's gaze flickered, an uncharacteristic flicker of surprise, and beneath it all, admiration. The gala, intended to be a sparkling display of wealth and power, had become an arena where quiet rebellion kindled a fire no one dared extinguish. As cameras clicked and whispers morphed into murmurs of disbelief, the nanny's choice stood clear and unyielding, a challenge to the gilded cage built by the Sheikh's ancestors, and perhaps to the walls hiding his own guarded heart. before the next secret of this splendid emirate unfolds, make sure you're already part of our caravan of stories. Many destinies are yet to be written, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave a like if the heart of this Billionaire Sheikh has already intrigued you. Tell me in the comments, from which city are you following this saga, and what twist do you think is coming next? Your passion for these dramas inspires us to keep going. Thank you for being with us. The murmurs in the grand ballroom crystallized into a tense silence as the nanny's bold stance shifted the air, heavy with expectation and scandal. The Billionaire Sheikh's eyes, usually as steady and unreadable as desert stone, flickered for a moment, betraying a current of emotion far deeper than any had ever dared glimpse. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, her simple gown brushing the marble floor, a stark contrast to the opulence that surrounded her. The guests held their breath, their gazes tangled in confusion and awe, while the chandeliers above cast fractured light that danced across the silk. Draperies. The scented exotic spices hung thick, masking the sharp tang of whispered judgments. The Sheikh's voice, deep and commanding, broke through the silence. "Why have you come here tonight, Layla?" His words were cold, but beneath the surface lay a turbulent undercurrent. The room seemed to contract, as if the walls themselves leaned in to hear her answer. Layla met his gaze steadily, her eyes alight with quiet defiance. "Because the truth can no longer be hidden behind golden veils," she said, her voice steady despite the familiar weight of his scrutiny. "Because our story deserves to be heard, no matter how inconvenient it might be." A flicker of something fierce passed through the Sheikh's eyes, mingled with a rare glint of respect. For years, he had worn his crown of authority and detachment like armor, but tonight, that armor showed cracks. The nanny, his nanny, who had nurtured the vulnerable child within him long forgotten, now challenged the indomitable force he presented to the world. The crowd shifted uneasily as the tension thickened. Whispers resumed, now laced with speculation and disbelief. It was unthinkable for someone of her standing to confront the Billionaire Sheikh so openly. Yet there she was, an unexpected storm beneath the glittering chandeliers, igniting a blaze of quiet revolt in a palace that had never before known challenge. The Sheikh stepped closer, the silk of his tailored suit whispering as he moved, the room seeming to hold its breath. His voice lowered, a dangerous edge threading his tone. "Speak plainly. What hidden truth threatens to unravel everything we have built?" Layla's hand trembled slightly, but her grip tightened around the edge of her gown. "I carry a secret, one that intertwines with your own more than you realize," she said softly. "A secret buried beneath layers of pain and deception. It's time you see me, not as a shadow lurking in the halls, but as a keeper of truths long denied." The room seemed suspended between heartbeats, the golden light catching in the Sheikh's eyes as he processed her words. 1,000 unspoken questions flashed across his face. The grandeur of the palace, the weight of generations, all seemed insignificant in the presence of this fragile yet unyielding woman. Memories stirred beneath his regal exterior, of days when innocent laughter filled these cold halls, of promises made and broken, of wounds hidden behind a mask of steel. Layla had witnessed it all, her quiet presence a thread woven through the tapestry of his life, yet never examined until now. He saw not merely a woman, but a tempest cloaked in plain fabric, a force that challenged his notions of power and control. The very thought unsettled him. Why reveal this now? His voice was barely above a whisper, though it thundered through the silent room. After all these years, Layla's gaze held steady, unwavering, because secrets buried only fester, and silence is a luxury we can no longer afford. The empire you command rests on foundations that are fragile, built not only of stone and gold, but of shadows and lies. She paused, catching the captivated eyes of the courtiers and guests. And if those foundations crumble, what remains? A cold breeze seemed to drift through the marble corridors, carrying with it a premonition. The guests shifted, a ripple of unease spreading through the opulent assembly. The Sheikh's jaw clenched, muscles taut beneath his skin. He lowered his voice, fierce and low, intended only for Layla's ears. "What do you want from me? From us?" Layla stepped closer, courage blazing within her. "I want the truth to bind us, not the lies that have kept us apart. I want you to recognize the woman who has stood at your side all these years. Not a mere guardian, but the keeper of your own story. If you are ready to face it, I am ready to tell it." His eyes searched hers, a chasm of silence swallowing the space between them. The curtained windows framed the dark night outside, stars blinking coldly against the endless desert sky, a silent witness to the storm brewing within these walls. Suddenly, a sharp sound cracked through the stillness. The heavy door at the far end of the hall swung open with a harsh, echoing creak. Every head turned as a tall figure, cloaked in shadow, appeared, blocking the doorway. His presence was a stark contrast to the rich light and warmth of the ballroom. A man whose dark eyes burned with fury and a determination that rivaled the Sheikh's own. The gathered guests recoiled, sensing an unseen battle about to unfold. The Nanny's serene defiance faltered for a heartbeat as the newcomer's gaze locked onto her. The Sheikh's shoulder tensed, his composure replaced by a steely resolve that crackled in the air. The man's voice cut through the tension, brittle and sharp. "You think the past can stay buried, Sheikh? Think again, because the secret you so desperately want to hide is no longer yours alone to guard." The ballroom seemed to inhale sharply, shadows lengthening. The billionaire Sheikh's eyes narrowed, a storm gathering behind them. Layla's breath caught. The secret was out, and everything was about to change. The tall figure standing at the entrance radiated an unmistakable aura of menace. His eyes, dark pools of fury, locked on Layla, as if she were the source of every storm that dared shake the foundations of this vast empire. The whispering crowd froze. The grandeur of the ballroom, suddenly dwarfed by the tension thickening like desert heat before a sandstorm. The billionaire Sheikh's lips pressed into a hard line, his entire frame tightening. His gaze flitted from the intruder to Layla, the invisible threads of their history pulled taut in an instant. Power, for all his wealth and authority, had never felt so fragile. You. The Sheikh's voice was low and edged with ice. How dare you breach my domain after all these years? The stranger stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence like shard glass. You think your secrets remain buried beneath silk and gold? Think again. This empire, this throne, your reign is riddled with shadows you refuse to face. A sharp breath escaped Layla's lips. The man's words stirred a tempest she had long feared. The secret, the one hidden in the crevices of the palace walls, intertwined with their very lives, was no longer a whispered ghost, but a living threat. The Sheikh's eyes darkened, the weight of countless unseen battles pressing down. "Speak your purpose," he commanded, his voice brokering no refusal. The stranger's gaze pierced Layla, sneering with cruel familiarity. "I am the reckoning you tried to keep locked away, and I am here to remind you, Layla, and to remind the Sheikh that the past does not forget, it returns." Layla's heart pounded beneath the delicate fabric of her gown, her calm shattered in a million fragile pieces. Yet she stood fast, the defiant flame in her eyes refusing to be extinguished. "Enough," the Sheikh's voice echoed, a storm finally breaking. "If you intend to challenge me, then speak now. Reveal what you bring to light, or leave this hall before I strip you of every shred of dignity." The stranger smiled, a cold, merciless twist of lips. Dignity? That was lost long ago. What remains is truth, and it will unravel the lies you built your kingdom upon. For a fleeting moment, the ballroom seemed suspended, crystal chandeliers shimmering overhead, like countless stars, bearing silent witness to the unraveling. Layla stepped forward, her voice steady but charged with tremors. "This secret isn't just mine. It's woven into both our fates. It has shaped the man before you and the woman who stands by him. We cannot outrun it any longer." The Sheikh's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through the fortress of his demeanor. Memories flickered behind his eyes, echoes of a past where innocence had been traded for survival, where promises had withered beneath betrayals, too sharp to name aloud. A tension unlike any before filled the space between them. The crowd held its collective breath, sensing the fragility and the fury roiling beneath steel facades. Then the stranger spoke again, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Soon all will be exposed. The lies, the hidden bloodlines, the betrayals that run deeper than the desert sands." The Sheikh's jaw tightened. He took a deliberate step toward the man, his presence radiating an unyielding will. "You threaten my family, my legacy." "And yet," the stranger replied, "you've kept this legacy built on deception. Tonight, it crumbles." Layla's gaze flicked between the two men, the Sheikh who had ruled with unassailable authority, and the man who dared to challenge that reign. Her mind raced with the dangers now unleashed, and the fragile hope that perhaps, in truth's brutal light, something new might be forged. The mingled scent of rare oud and jasmine filled the air, but beneath it lingered a sharper tang, fear and anticipation weaving a silent symphony among the courtiers. Suddenly, the ornate doors behind the stranger groaned, edging open further. A second figure appeared, a woman cloaked in midnight velvet, her eyes glinting with secrets and pain. The room gasped. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged neither to privilege nor to exile, but to a reckoning long overdue. The Sheikh's breath caught. The woman, her presence was a living echo of the past, a shadow long denied but never forgotten. Her lips curled into a faint but dangerous smile. "Brother," she said softly, voice imbued with bitter remembrance. The stranger bowed his head slightly in deference, confirming a bond that twisted the room's fragile equilibrium. Suddenly, the quiet defiance that Layla embodied seemed both resolute and perilously isolated. The Billionaire Sheikh's eyes flickered between the two, the mask of unshakable power cracking just enough to reveal the storm raging beneath. "Explain yourselves." His voice was cold steel, yet tinged with a weary pain. "What is this game you play? What truth lies beneath your sudden return?" The woman's eyes locked onto Layla's, laced with challenge and a hint of sorrow. The truth no one dared speak aloud. The betrayal that shattered our family, and the lies that have kept us apart. Layla's fingers clenched around a hidden pendant beneath her gown, a fragile talisman tethering her to the fragments of her own story, the one she was still afraid to fully reveal. Yet tonight demanded courage, born from desperation. The Emirate's glittering walls, so often a fortress of silence and power, seemed to shrink around them. The dance of light and shadow betrayed no allegiances, no mercy. Sheikh's breath was steady at first, then ragged. "If what you say is true," he murmured, "then the kingdom I built stands on a precipice, and I must decide what I will save and what must be burned to ashes." The newcomer smiled, a blade hidden beneath silk. "The truth isn't merciful. It demands nothing less." As the guests shivered under the weight of unfolding revelation, Layla's eyes never left the Sheikh's. Between them burned the faintest spark, a fragile hope that from this maelstrom they might find salvation. But before the night could surrender its darkest secrets, a faint yet chilling whisper floated from the shadowed corners of the room. Not all truths are meant to be uncovered. The Sheikh spun toward the source, heart pounding against the centuries-old iron of his will. But there was only silence. Outside, the desert wind howled, an ancient echo, mourning what was about to be lost. And in the tension-soaked air, Layla realized with a sudden, piercing clarity, the battle for the soul of this empire was only just beginning. The ballroom remained suspended in that fragile, suffocating silence, the grand chandeliers casting fractured light over faces etched with shock, curiosity, and veiled hostility. The dark-haired man at the entrance, the specter from the past, stood unmoving, a living challenge to the unshakable authority of the Billionaire Sheikh. The Sheikh's figure, usually an unyielding pillar of calm, tensed as waves of memories crashed beneath his cold exterior. His gaze, sharp as a desert hawk's, did not waver from the intruder's face, shadowed by years of pain and unresolved battles. "You have no place here," the Sheikh said. Smile was a frozen slash of malice. "I am not here to beg. I bring the truth, wrapped in consequence, a reckoning long overdue." Layla's breath caught, her heart drumming feverishly beneath the modest fabric that cloaked her. Though years had passed, the tension between these three was a living thing. She stepped forward, steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "It's finally time," she said, voice firm like tempered steel. "The lies, the betrayals, the half-truths must be pulled from their shadows. We cannot keep running from what binds us all." The Sheikh's eyes darkened, betraying a flicker of vulnerability he quickly masked. His voice was less commanding now, raw with a lifetime of buried anguish. "You don't understand the depths you're stirring." The stranger's lips curled. "I understand more than you think. This empire you built, this throne you guard, rests precariously on secrets that bleed beneath the marble floor. Tonight, those secrets will rise and demand their due." The guests shifted uneasily, the heavy notes of oud and jasmine now laced with an undercurrent of fear. The air grew thick, as if the opulence itself held its breath. A new presence emerged from the shadows behind the man, a woman draped in midnight velvet, her eyes ablaze with sorrow and fierce resolve. The atmosphere snapped taut, as if lightning had struck the room. "Brother," she addressed the intruder, her voice a whisper edged with steel. "It's time to end this." The Sheikh's lips thinned, his eyes flickering between the siblings, anger and restrained torment warring within their depths. It was a confrontation long fated, now ignited beneath the crystal chandeliers. Layla's fingers curled around the pendant concealed beneath her gown, a fragment of forgotten promises and shrouded truths. Yet now, the weight of her secret, no longer felt like a shackle, but a fragile hope. The Sheikh spoke, voice brittle but resolute. "What betrayal could carry such power that it demands the destruction of all I have fought for?" The woman's gaze locked with Layla's, a silent accusation and a challenge laid bare. "Not all betrayals are born of malice. Some are carved by silence, by the absence of truth." A tense stillness settled as the words hung between them. The distant sound of a fountain running somewhere in the vast palace reminded them that outside this gilded cage, the desert stretched relentless and unchanging, blind to human frailties. The Sheikh's breath hitched, not from weakness, but as a sign of the storm gathering in his soul. "Truth," he said slowly, as if testing the word on his tongue. "Is it a gift or a curse?" "Both," Layla replied softly. "And tonight, it's unavoidable." The dark-haired man stepped forward, pulling a sheaf of faded papers from beneath his cloak. As he spread them on a gilded table, the courtiers leaned in, caught between dread and fascination. "These documents expose the lies," the man declared, voice strong. "Blood ties concealed, alliances forged in darkness, sacrifices made and forgotten." The room held its breath as Layla glanced toward the Sheikh, seeing the flicker of pain and reluctant acceptance flash across his face. "Why now?" the Sheikh murmured, voice strained. "Why bring ruin upon us tonight?" "Because," the woman said, stepping beside her brother, "because the past doesn't care for timing. It will unravel at its own pace, and when it does, the only choice is to either fall apart or rebuild." Layla swallowed hard, her eyes searching the usually impenetrable face of the Sheikh. Beneath the veneer of icy power, she glimpsed a man teetering on the edge, torn between his duty to his legacy and the fragile hope she embodied. Suddenly, the ballroom doors thundered open once more. A contingent of palace guards poured in, their faces grim and eyes wide with urgency. The head guard bowed deeply to the sheikh, voice barely above a whisper. "My sheikh, there has been a breach. Someone has infiltrated the palace grounds. I fear this is only the beginning." The sheikh's jaw clenched, his commanding presence snapping back into place like steel hardened by fire. Yet there was a haunted shadow beneath his vigilant gaze, a man battling more than external threats. Layla stepped closer, courage flaring. "Whatever comes next," she said, voice unwavering, "we face it together. No more secrets, no more lies." The sheikh turned to her, eyes stormy and conflicted. His hand lifted, hesitated, then fell. "And what if this truth destroys what little remains?" he asked, words heavy with fear and longing. She met his gaze, unwavering. "Then we will build anew, from the ashes, from the ruins. Because hidden beneath this empire of gold and dust, there is still love, and it is stronger than any secret." The crowd sensed the fragile truce settling over the room. The siblings exchanged glances, their presence a stark reminder that the past could no longer be denied. Outside, beyond the palace walls, the desert wind howled mournfully, carrying the echoes of promises broken and a future yet unwritten. And in the heart of the ballroom, beneath the glittering stars of crystal and gold, the billionaire sheikh's clenched fists trembled slightly, and a new war for the soul of his kingdom whispered into being. But before the night could fully unravel, a piercing cry shattered the heavy air, a scream cutting through silk. And shadow. All eyes snapped to the source, but the space was empty. Yet somewhere in the depths of the palace, the birth of a revelation had begun, and nothing, not even the might of the sheikh, could stop it now. The sudden scream hung in the air, like a shard of ice, slicing through the thick tension of the ballroom. Yet no source appeared. Only empty space swallowed the echo, as guests froze in fearful silence. The billionaire sheikh's eyes snapped to the shadows, his breath tightening against the walls of the empire he built on secrets and power. His hand twitched at his side, fingers tightening into a fist of steel, a silent summons for control amid the chaos unfolding. Layla's gaze flickered towards the empty space, the tremor in her heart mirroring the silent storm rising within the palace. Her fingers unconsciously caressed the pendant nestled beneath her gown, a fragile talisman anchoring her to the fragmented past she'd vowed to reveal. Yet now, the dangers of truth had leapt from shadow into the glaring light of challenge. The dark-haired stranger locked eyes once more with the sheikh, a venomous smile twisting his lips. "You sense the fear, sheikh," he said low, the words slick with mockery. "Because the walls here guard more than marble. They guard the lives built on silence." A servant cautiously approached, whispering urgently to a guard before vanishing back into the folds of silk and gold. A ripple of unease spread like a desert wind across the gathered nobles, their polished smiles having hardened into masks of apprehension. Suddenly, the woman in midnight velvet stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence with a sharp clarity. The time for hiding is over. The shadows have lengthened far beyond the borders of this palace, and soon no secret will find refuge here. The Sheikh's eyes darkened, shadows flickering across his stony expression as he regarded the two figures, both ghosts from a history he'd tried desperately to keep buried. His voice was low, but the weight behind it shook the room. If you believe this house will fall, know this: I will burn every brick before it crumbles beneath the weight of lies. Layla moved closer, stepping into the fragile light that flickered like a candle in the cavernous hall. Her voice was steady, but filled with unspoken pain. And yet, the truth will not be destroyed by fire or fury. It lives in the fractures you refuse to see, the cracks that run through us all. If we do not face it now, it will consume more than your empire. It will consume you. The Sheikh's breath hitched, the cold fire in his eyes flickering briefly into something more vulnerable. Memories rushed forth, a laughter silenced too soon, promises that turned to ash, the weight of a throne born from sacrifice and secrecy. Layla was not merely a keeper of his child's past, she was the keeper of his own broken soul. Why did you not come to me before? His voice faltered, breaking the command into something fragile and almost pleading. Because you were lost in a fortress of your making. She replied quietly, and I was afraid the truth would shatter what little remained between us. The stranger scoffed, stepping forward with a paper-thin smile. Fear has its price, Sheikh, and tonight you will pay yours. Of the papers, glinting like weapons poised to strike, the gathered guests leaned forward with bated breath, caught between fascination and dread. The woman in velvet's eyes were fierce, focused on Layla, as if daring her to stand by the side of the man who once severed family ties in the name of power. What is buried beneath your crown, she said, is not just treachery, but a fracture that could split this legacy into ruins. Layla's jaw tightened. Or perhaps it is the only chance to mend what was broken. When secrets are no longer shadows, they offer a path to healing. The Sheikh's gaze softened, glistening with the weight of 1,000 unshed regrets. He looked to Layla, his silent anchor amid the storm, as the walls of his carefully constructed world threatened to quake. Then a sharp rap echoed from the grand doors. The palace guards entered swiftly, faces grim. The head guard bowed deeply before the Sheikh. My Sheikh, an unidentified force has breached the northern gates. We fear this is only the beginning of a larger threat. The room held its breath. The elegant opulence suddenly betrayed a vulnerability no gold could mask. The Sheikh's voice regained its iron edge. Prepare the palace defenses. No one breaks through my walls tonight. Layla stepped closer, feeling the heat from the silk and gold around them, now blend with the cold sting of approaching war. This is no longer just an attack on the throne, she whispered. It's an assault on all our truths, and we must stand together. He looked down at her, eyes fierce yet uncertain. And if the truth destroys us? Her steady reply was a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Then at least we fall as one truth, not a legion of lies. The trio, Sheikh, Layla, and the intruder, stood as the fragile axis of an empire trembling on the edge. The ballroom's light flickered, shadows twisting, as if the palace itself were holding its breath. Outside, the desert wind wailed, a mournful song for the empire's fragile peace. Then, in the silence that followed, a single crystal glass shattered somewhere in the distance, its sharp song a prelude to the storm about to consume them all. And unseen, a shadow detached itself from the crowd, slipping silently toward the heart of the palace, carrying a secret more dangerous than any whispered tonight. The billionaire Sheikh's eyes narrowed, a silent vow burning deeper than the desert stars. The war for his kingdom's soul had only just begun. The clatter of the shattered glass still echoed faintly through the vast gilded hall, its sharpness slicing through the heavy quiet. Like a cold desert wind, every eye remained fixed on the empty space where the scream had sprung from, as if the very air held its breath in fearful anticipation. The chandeliers overhead flickered, casting trembling shadows that leapt across the marbled floor, reflecting the unrest growing beneath the opulent surface. The billionaire Sheikh's gaze was unyielding, fierce as the midday sun, beating down on the endless dunes beyond the palace's walls. His fists clenched at his sides, veins taut beneath the tailored black velvet of his suit. The fragile veneer of control he had so carefully maintained cracked beneath the weight of a secret about to erupt. Not just any secret, but one that threatened to undo the legacy carved by his ancestors' hands. Layla's calm exterior trembled ever so slightly as she caught the faintest quiver of vulnerability in the Sheikh's stormy eyes. She wrapped a trembling hand around the pendant concealed beneath her gown, the cool metal grounding her amidst the whirlwind. This was no longer just a matter of whispered family betrayals or the delicate dance of remembrance. The battle for the soul of an empire stood at the precipice. The dark-haired stranger stepped forward again, his presence like a shadow stretching to envelope the room. His smile was a cruel slash, his voice low and sharp. Walls built on lies collapse with the softest touch. Tonight, they tremble under the weight of truth. The guests murmured uneasily, sensing the shifting tides beneath the opulence. The rich scent of oud and jasmine mingled strangely with the colder undercurrent of fear, wrapping the hall in a dense fog of uncertainty. The woman in midnight velvet moved with a predatory grace through the crowd, her eyes blazing as she met Layla's gaze. For a moment, the world seemed to hold still, the palace walls shrinking until only these two women remained standing amid the ruins of concealed pasts. Her voice was a whisper that carried like thunder. We owe it all to the legacy of silence, a silence that shattered the bonds meant to protect us. Layla swallowed hard, the thick silk of her gown clinging like chains. Her voice emerged steady, but filled with the weight of years. And now, it is silence that endangers what's left. We can no longer hide behind shadows and veils. The Sheikh's breath hitched, as if the very air had turned to fire and ice within his lungs. He lowered his voice, the iron in his tone barely masking the anguish beneath. You speak of bonds broken, but what blood ties remain when truth has been buried under decades of betrayal? A flicker of sorrow passed through his relentless eyes, hardening instantly as he lifted his chin in defiance. I built this empire on nothing but loyalty and order. If the foundation crumbles, so will everything. My family, my honor, my very name. Then it is that foundation which must be tested, the stranger said, spreading the faded documents on a grandly carved ebony table. The ancient papers looked delicate beneath the crystal glow, but their contents promised to cut sharper than any blade. Untouched truths about lineage, pacts made in darkness, a history buried in blood and deceit. The ballroom seemed to shrink, suffocating under the sudden weight of revelation. Courtiers leaned forward, eyes wide with a disturbing blend of fascination and dread. Layla's breath caught, her dark eyes flickering between the Sheikh's steely facade and the exposed wounds beneath. "It is our story," she whispered. "Wounds we can no longer pretend are not bleeding." The Sheikh's jaw twitched, muscles rippling with tension. He took a slow step towards the table, fingers brushing the documents, but not touching them, reluctant to welcome the ruin they forecast. Suddenly, the palace doors burst open with a force that sent a ripple through the gathered crowd. Guards flooded the room, faces grim beneath the harsh light. The head guard bowed deeply before the Sheikh, his voice barely more than a rasp. "My Sheikh, the northern gates have been compromised. Archers from the desert tribes have breached the outer walls. It's no longer a shadow threat. It is war." The silence cracked, tensions snapping like stretched silk. Eyes darted nervously between the guards and the trembling documents. The Sheikh's entire presence surged, regal and implacable once more. His voice rolled across the room like thunder, demanding order in the rising storm. "Seal the gates, double the sentries. No one enters without my command." He glanced down at Layla, the fire in his dark pupils now tempered by the fragile bond forming between them. "If the empire falls, we will face its ashes together." Layla stepped forward, the gown's fabric whispering against the marble as courage flared inside her. "Not as enemies, but as the truth that binds us all. No more lies, no more broken promises." The woman in velvet's eyes narrowed, ice and fire entwined in their depths. "You think the storm outside is the only threat? The deeper danger lurks within these walls." Her words hung heavy in the charged air. The noble faces, polished yet pale, acknowledged the unspoken threat. Envy and ambition nested like vipers in the court's gilded heart. The stranger smiled thinly, voice dipped in venom. "All empires rot from within, Sheikh. Tonight you see just how deep the decay runs." The Sheikh's hand curled into a fist, his composure a hammerhead against the tides of truth and treachery. Yet beneath the armor of pride and power, something fragile and profoundly human flickered. Uncertainty, regret, and an unspoken plea for salvation. Layla's voice broke through the storm, soft but unyielding. "We can't undo the past, but we can choose what comes next." Together, for a moment, time unraveled, a suspended breath, drawn in the eye of a tempest. The palace itself seemed to pulse with expectancy, the flickering light catching on the glittering jewels, the carved wood, the shimmering silks of 1,000 secrets. Then, from the shadows near the ornate pillars, a figure stepped forward, silent, unseen until now. A messenger cloaked in midnight black, face hidden beneath a hood. His entrance stole the breath of the assembly. "No," the sheikh murmured, voice barely audible, yet chilling as the desert night. "Not now." But the messenger's hand lifted, releasing a folded parchment, its seal cracked, the ink smeared with urgency and dread. "The desert winds carry more than sand and silence, my sheikh," the silent voice intoned, a whisper from the void. "They bear the herald of a reckoning none here are prepared to face." The sheikh's eyes narrowed, ancient pain and new resolve warring across his battered soul. His kingdom teetered on the edge of ruin, mysteries unraveling like the desert night uncoiling before dawn. And as the guests watched in frozen anticipation, the words written on that crumpled parchment would shatter the fragile peace and change everything forever. The shattered glass had barely settled into silence when a low murmur rippled through the grand ballroom, as if the very walls of the palace were holding their breath. The crystal chandeliers above flickered, casting unstable light over the assembly's frozen faces. The air, heavy with the scent of rare oud and jasmine, seemed charged, electric with anticipation and unease. The billionaire sheikh stood unmoving at the center, his fists still clenched tightly at his sides, a storm barely contained beneath the surface. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd, but it was Layla's steady presence beside him that seemed the only tether keeping him from unraveling completely. Layla inhaled slowly, her gaze locked on the enigmatic messenger who had just emerged from the shadows. His face was obscured beneath a dark hood, but the weight of his steps and the folded parchment clutched tightly in his hands spoke louder than words. That fragment of paper held promises of ruin, or perhaps redemption. As the messenger's eyes met the sheikh's, a silent understanding passed between them. Without a word, he extended the parchment, and the sheikh reached out with hesitant authority, breaking the fragile quiet as the paper slipped into his palm. The crowd leaned in, the golden stillness pierced by the soft rustle of silk gowns and murmured speculations. The sheikh's expression faltered, a rare crack in his impenetrable facade. His fingers curled around the parchment, as if trying to draw strength from its fragile folds and the truths it carried. Layla's heart pounded, the pendant beneath her gown pressing cold and unyielding against her skin, a stark contrast to the heat of the moment. She searched the sheikh's eyes for any sign of surrender, any glimpse of the man behind the legend. There, in that fleeting instance, vulnerability and defiance collided. A man torn between the empire built on power and the woman who sought to reshape his world with honesty. This, the sheikh's voice, broke the silence, low and heavy with the weight of centuries. This is the reckoning we could not escape. The woman in midnight velvet stepped forward, her gaze sharp and unrelenting as she met Layla's with a mixture of challenge and sorrow. "The desert keeps no secrets forever," she murmured. "What lies buried beneath the sands of time will always find its way to the surface." Outside, a sudden gust stirred the long silk drapes, sending flickering shadows racing across the marble floor. The palace, once a sanctuary of cold control and whispered lies, now felt fragile, as if the slightest tremor might bring it all crashing down. "Words will not save us now," the stranger's voice cut through the tension, rougher than before. "Steel and fire approach these gates. The outer walls have been broken. Our enemies know our weaknesses." A shiver ran through the guests. The delicate balance of power, carefully maintained for generations, was teetering on the edge of collapse. The Sheikh's posture shifted, commanding and unyielding once more, but with a shadow deepening in his eyes. "Prepare the defenses," he ordered, voice resounding like thunder rolling over the vast desert. "Double the guards and seal every passage. No one breaches this fortress while I draw breath." Layla's hand found his arm, hesitant but firm, a touch full of solidarity amid the swirling chaos. "This is no longer just a battle for the throne, my Sheikh. It is a battle for truth, for the future of everything we hold dear." He turned to face her fully, the fire in his dark eyes burning with intensity, tempered by the fragile trust growing between them. "And if that truth destroys us both?" Her reply was steady, unwavering, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. "Then at least we will fall together, unbroken, no longer bound by the lies of yesterday." The woman in velvet's eyes narrowed, shadows dancing within their depths. "You speak of unity as if it were a choice. But empires rot from the inside, long before the desert claims their stones." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Secrets more dangerous than any external foe lurked within the opulent court. Whispers of betrayal and ambition braided tightly into the gilded tapestry surrounding the Sheikh. The stranger's smile was thin, cruel, like a wound reopening. "Tonight, the palace walls will finally know the price of silence." Suddenly, the weight of silence was shattered by hurried footsteps, echoing through the marble corridors. The head palace guard appeared, face grim, his eyes wide with urgency as he bowed before the Sheikh. "My Sheikh," he said, voice low yet urgent, "the southern perimeter has also been compromised. Scouts report movement of hostile forces converging fast. This is no mere raid. It is the prelude to a siege." The assembly gasped, the fragile calm fracturing like glass. The Sheikh's jaw clenched tightly, muscles coiling with renewed determination. His gaze locked with Layla's, an unspoken vow passing between them. "We stand at the edge of a storm," he declared, voice ringing with unwavering command. "But no storm lasts forever." Layla stepped beside him, her figure poised and resolute against the opulent backdrop of crisis. "Together, we are stronger than the fears that seek to divide us." A sudden flicker in the crowd drew attention to a shadow moving with unnatural stealth. An unseen figure slipping through the throng, nearly invisible amid the swirling robes and anxious whispers. Neither the Sheikh nor his allies noticed the faint glint of a blade concealed within a gloved hand. The tension cracked, stretching taut as a desert bowstring pulled to its breaking point. The Sheikh's eyes, sharp and burning, caught the fleeting motion out of the corner of his vision. Before anyone could react, a whispered voice broke through the mounting storm. "Not all enemies come with swords drawn." The room froze, breaths caught, eyes wide. The threat no longer lay beyond the palace walls, but crept within, invisible and intimate. The billionaire Sheikh's dark eyes flared with fierce resolve, the weight of legacy and love fierce enough to ignite the shifting sands beneath his feet. He stepped forward, commanding as the sun at its zenith. But his voice was tight, haunted by the knowledge that this battle, this war for the heart of his empire, might demand sacrifices no crown could protect. The whispered threat lingered, a spectral promise in the night air. The betrayal lies closest to home. The delicate parchment trembled in the billionaire Sheikh's hand, its edges worn from secrets hidden too long. The sharp scent of oud mingled with the rising tension, suffusing the golden hall with a heavy weight that pressed upon every heart. His dark eyes traced the faded ink, committed to memory the names and treacheries inked there, feeling the foundation of his world quake beneath his fingertips. Layla watched him, her breath caught between fear and a desperate hope. The pendant hidden beneath her gown pulsed cold against her skin, a silent talisman anchoring her to the truth she had vowed to reveal. She stepped closer, sensing the fragile moment when power and vulnerability collided, a moment the palace had never truly seen before. Outside, the desert winds howled, carrying faint echoes of ancient betrayal, weaving through the palace corridors like a ghost in flight. The guards' hurried footsteps faded into a distant drumbeat, as if the very stones beneath their feet anticipated the storm gathering at the heart of this empire. The woman in midnight velvet, her eyes sharp as desert glass, held Layla's gaze as if challenging her to stand unwavering in the storm. Her voice broke the thick silence, like polished steel. The web of lies spun here cannot hold forever. The truth demands release, even if it scorches everything in its path. The Sheikh's jaw tightened, the weight of his ancestors' expectations pressing upon him like a vice. "We built an empire on loyalty and honor," he said, voice laced with brittle conviction. Yet those words ring hollow when shadows twist the light. The stranger, whose face was etched with years of pain and rancor, unfolded the parchment over the ebony table. Flickering chandelier lights played over a map of forbidden alliances, bloodlines concealed, and promises shattered in secret. His voice carried a venom that cut deeper than any blade. This is no mere history written in dust. It is a reckoning, a legacy stained by betrayal so profound it threatens to swallow all you hold. The room trembled with a collective breath held taut, the courtiers' eyes darting like wary prey, knowing the palace was no longer sanctuary but battleground. Layla's lips parted, her voice steady but resolute. This empire was never built on stone alone, but on the silence of those it crushed beneath its weight. We cannot mend what we refuse to acknowledge. The Sheikh's eyes flickered with stormy memories, laughter fading into tears, promises lost beneath cold stones, the weight of a crown that had blinded him to the true cost. He took a slow, measured step toward the table, fingers hovering just above the ragged edges of the documents, as if tempted to burn them alive or clutch them as a lifeline. Before the air could thicken further, a sudden, jarring knock shattered the tense stillness. The palace doors burst open, heralding a new wave of urgency as the head guard strode in, face marked by exhaustion and fear. "My sheikh," his voice cracked like dry earth. "The southern walls have fallen. The desert tribes swarm like locusts, converging fast. This is no mere skirmish. It is the beginning of a siege." Gasps flickered through the court like wildfire, golden lamps flickering as unease leapt from face to face. The grand ballroom, once a sanctuary of opulence, felt suddenly brittle, its glittering walls unable to shield against the gathering storm. The sheikh's posture straightened, regal and unyielding, as centuries of command rose. Anew in his voice, "Seal every gate, double the guards. No shadow crosses these thresholds without my leave." Layla moved beside him, her hand a quiet anchor on his arm. This war is not just steel and arrows. It is the battle for those truths long buried. We face it as one, or fall divided by secrets. He met her gaze, the fire in his eyes now tempered by a fragile tenderness reserved for her alone. "If that truth destroys all we have?" Her answer was unwavering, the steady flame beneath layers of silk. "Then we rise from the ashes, stronger than any lie that came before." The woman in midnight shifted, her gaze flickering like desert flames as she cut through the murmurs surrounding them. "Power rots where silence festers. This palace may fall because the poison is already within these walls." A murmur of agreement rippled through the nobility, their polished masks flickering with hidden fears and whispered betrayals. The stranger's cruel smile deepened, savoring the unraveling of his long-awaited reckoning. The sheikh's fingers curled into a tight fist, the king's stern mask falling away for a heartbeat, revealing the man beneath, the man who bore the scars of love lost and trust shattered. Yet beneath the weight of doom, a stubborn ember remained, fueled by Layla's unwavering strength. Her voice sliced through the heavy air, firm and resolute. "We can't rewrite what was broken, but we choose how to fight for what remains, together." Time seemed to slow, the palace itself holding its breath as the walls echoed with the silent tension. Every flicker of chandelier light was a promise of imminent upheaval. The sense of exotic spices mingled with the cold bite of fear. Then, from the shadowed recesses near towering pillars, a figure emerged, silent and cloaked, their identity masked by a dark hood. Eyes narrowed, the sheikh's breath caught. He moved instantly, a predator guarding his territory. "No," he whispered, voice low and brittle, like desert stone. "Not now." But the messenger lifted a trembling hand, revealing a sealed scroll whose wax was splintered, as if time itself had fractured under the weight of its message. "The desert breathes more than heat and silence." "My sheikh," came the ghostly voice. "It carries the herald of a reckoning. None among us can flee." The sheikh's gaze hardened, the pain of ancient betrayal warring with the fires of new resolve. His kingdom teetered on the brink, its legacy threatened by truths more devastating than any external enemy. As the crowd strained forward, the words inscribed on that fragile parchment whispered like a curse, ready to dismantle everything they knew and feared. But before the murmurs could swell, a faint but chilling note pierced the heavy air. A voice, low and unfamiliar. "Not every war is waged with swords. eyes snapped toward its source, only to find emptiness cloaked in shadow. Yet the weight of that phrase hung, a specter stalking the gilded halls. The billionaire Sheikh's dark eyes flickered, flame and shadow intertwining. The battle for his empire had stepped beyond fortresses and armies. It had ignited in the silence where trust once lived. He stepped forward, the king burdened not only by crown, but by love and ruin alike. The whisper hung between the glint of jewels and the soft rustle of silk. The greatest betrayal waits closest to home. The dawn broke gently over the vast emirate, spilling warm light across the marble floors of the palace and chasing away the shadows that had haunted the night. The golden hues seemed to breathe new life into the walls, cleansing them of the secrets that had almost torn the kingdom apart. A calm settled, fragile yet undeniable, as if the desert itself exhaled a quiet blessing. Within the heart of the grand ballroom, now stripped of tension, the billionaire Sheikh stood beside Layla, the woman who had weathered storms both within his empire and his soul. His gaze, once sharp and guarded like the edges of a scimitar, softened into something vulnerable and unburdened. No longer the impenetrable monarch, aloof behind a mask of power. He was simply a man who had found redemption through truth. Layla's hand slipped into his, their fingers intertwining with a steady certainty, forged in trials, far deeper than gold or glory. The pendant beneath her gown caught the early light, glinting faintly, a symbol not of hidden shadows, but of resilience and hope. The court, once fractured by whispers and suspicion, now gathered in an unspoken truce. The woman in midnight velvet stood nearby, no longer an adversary, but a solemn witness to the dawn of a new era. The dark-haired stranger, his purpose fulfilled, relaxed his stance. The weight of decades-old grudges began to lift like morning mist over desert dunes. The sheikh cleared his throat, his deep voice carrying across the silent room. Tonight, we faced the ruins of our past, laid bare beneath the relentless light of truth. It was a reckoning long overdue. But from those ruins, we have the chance to build something stronger, something real. He turned toward the crowd, his eyes steady and filled with renewed conviction. This empire stands not on the hollow triumph of secrets, but on the foundations of honesty and forgiveness. I vow to lead it with a heart that no longer hides behind walls of silence. A murmur of assent rippled through the assembly. Noble faces softened. Courtiers exchanged glances that spoke of cautious hope rather than fear. Layla stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. We have all carried burdens, silent scars etched into the bones of this palace and its people. But those scars shape us, they do not define us. Together, we hold the power to heal and to protect. The Sheikh's gaze returned to her, the man and the ruler finally converging into one. Layla, your strength and honesty have been my compass through this darkness. With you beside me, I am no longer a prisoner of the past. A gentle smile curved her lips, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears of relief and joy. And I will stand by you, not as a shadow or a guardian, but as your equal, your partner, your future. Outside, the first birds sang their morning song, their melodies weaving through the open windows, mingling with the scent of blooming jasmine and fresh earth, a promise of rebirth. The palace gardens, bathed in soft sunlight, bore witness to the transformation happening within these walls. Once merely a backdrop to gatherings of power and prestige, the gardens now seemed alive with possibility, flowers unfurling like new dreams, the breeze carrying away echoes of old wounds. In the quiet that followed, the Sheikh and Layla found themselves alone beneath the grand archways overlooking the vast desert. For a long moment, they simply stood together, the silence between them filled with unspoken promises and a shared understanding deeper than words. "I never believed I could find peace," the Sheikh admitted softly. "But you showed me that even a kingdom built on secrets can find light." Layla pressed his hand to her heart. "Peace is not the absence of struggle, but the triumph over it. And together we are unstoppable." As the sun climbed higher, casting golden rays over the endless sands, a sense of harmony finally settled. A kingdom healed not by might or gold, but by truth and love. Years later, the tale of the billionaire Sheikh and Layla would be told, not as a story of power and betrayal, but as a legend of redemption and unwavering love, a testament to the strength found in facing one's demons and embracing hope. And in the heart of the emirate, beneath skies vast and eternal, the palace stood strong, no longer a fortress of whispers, but a home where new dreams took root, forever nurtured by the quiet courage of a man and the woman who transformed him.